we're on to our next session and have the deep pleasure of introducing Nandini. She heads the Center in Delivery for Global Logic Noida, the largest engineering center of Global Logic. Nandini is a seasoned delivery and innovation leader who is a frequent speaker with the media and at technology conferences hosted by thought leadership groups. Global Logic specializes in design and technology-led innovation services along with digital transformation. Having been with Global Logic for more than 9 years, Nandini understands and owns the media and commerce vertical to its brim. She's a perfect mix and fit as she speaks for the technology while understanding the business very well. Nandini, please.
Thank you, Sumit, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, so, before I start introducing the panelists, what I want to do is I want to just set the context for the topic that we have chosen. The topic is very, very interesting. It's called Taming the Rush, E-commerce Technology Strategies. Now, why did we choose this topic? See, most of you, I'm sure, have heard about Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Thanksgiving, right, which is really a rage in the US. And the e-commerce players do a lot of things to prepare for those big occasions. And this is catching up in India also in the last few years, where you see that there is a Diwali sale, Independence Day sale, Republic Day sale, and, whatnot, New Year and Christmas. And it's not just the online apparel and all kinds of shopping that takes a surge. It's also the train, airline, and travel bookings, which definitely, take a big surge. So, and, even campaigns like Unbox Zindagi and Apni Dukaan, they're so popular, right? Now, what are the reasons for this explosion? There are multiple reasons in India for this explosion. I think the first and foremost being the internet user base, which is penetrating like anything, right? It's a big phenomenon out there. And then the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they have embraced online shopping like anything. And we also have the small ticket items, which was never unheard of. They are selling online. And, then even services are selling online. Like today, you can sit at home and get any kind of service that you want, right? They're all selling online. And of course, the mobile and data traffic is increasing like anything. And thanks to demonetization, people are also warming up to other payment methods and not just restricting to cash on delivery, thanks to Mr. Modi. So while we all understand what all these companies do to gear up for these big days, like, they do all these crazy promotions, buy one, get five, and, early bird, and God knows what all. They come up with such innovative campaigns. They also give you deals and discounts and coupons and, a lot of other things. There's a lot of preparation which goes on behind the scenes to prepare for those big occasions. But what I as an audience, and I'm sure all of you as an audience would want to know from the technology experts is, how do these companies prepare from a technology standpoint? How do they prepare for those scalability and performance and high availability and security? How do they do it? So that is why we chose this topic, because we want to hear from the experts as to what goes on from a technology standpoint preparing for these big events. So it's a great pleasure for me to invite the esteemed panelists. So I'm going to go one by one and call them on stage. First and foremost, I would like to invite Sanjay Mohan. Sanjay heads the MakeMyTrip technology products and engineering operations. Prior to joining MakeMyTrip, he was also part of 2 consumer internet startups, and he was heading the Yahoo Cloud Platform Group. Something very interesting about Sanjay, he's an amateur dog trainer, and he's able to understand their non-verbal cues and body language. And he says that if you can understand what a dog communicates, it's very easy to understand humans. Thank you, Sanjay, and welcome. Next, I would like to go with Gaurav Gupta, Snapdeal. So Gaurav is the VP Engineering and Head of Cloud Platform and Infrastructure and Snapdeal at Snapdeal. So Gaurav is a self-confessed geek. I've been after him to share something very interesting about him, and he says, no, I'm a geek. That's all that I want to talk about myself. He has several US patents and IEEE publications to his name. Since what he does is very, very technical, I'm going to just simply read it out. He is building an enterprise product for data centers and cloud platform and managing a distributed microservice architecture and infrastructure on one of the largest hybrid cloud platform using OpenStack and AWS. And I think it's called Cirrus, right? Thank you, Gaurav. Thanks for agreeing to being the panelist. Next is Dhruv Singhal, Amazon. He's head solution architecture at Amazon India. Dhruv is an expert on technology, and he has written extensively on various technology concepts, including self-service provisioning, enterprise application architecture, and service-oriented architecture. When I asked Dhruv, share something very interesting about you, what he shared is extremely interesting and exciting. At an age when everybody wants to take it easy, late 40s, Dhruv decided to learn C# and multi-threaded programming in his spare time, and he developed a code which is in production, deployed for online trading of securities. Thank you so much, Dhruv. Thank you for agreeing to being a panelist. I would like to invite Puneet Goyal, OYO. He's a VP Engineering at OYO. He loves building teams that builds amazing products. He loves working on design, implementation, and scaling of large distributed platforms. He worked with GoIbibo in the past, and he co-founded Code Ignition. And something very interesting about Puneet, which I also share, he loves to travel to exotic destinations and is a squash player. That's not me. Okay, now I would like to invite Pushpinder. He's CEO and founder of Travel Khana. He's a technology entrepreneur who conceptualized the idea of a marketplace for travelers who are on the move, but they want to order meals of their choice. He loves solving technology problems, and he wants to rewrite the rules for the way people travel in India. Thank you so much, all of you. Just some ground rules. Please keep your phones on silent. We will take dedicated 30 minutes for the panel discussion, and then we have a good 10 to 12 minutes for audience interaction. So you can, keep collecting your questions, and we will definitely have enough time for your set of questions. Thank you so much, and I'll get started. Okay, so my first question is going to be a very typical question. How do you guys plan, from a technology standpoint? So what all goes in from a capacity planning, both software, hardware, the front office, the back end, like warehouse, inventory? There's a lot that we want to know from you. Anybody can go first, and, please keep adding to it. We'll have to share the 3 mics that we have between the 5 of you.
So I think the first thing, whenever we are in the process of running a sale, the first thing we try to figure out is what is the expected traffic that we see, because scaling without knowing what traffic you want to support is really difficult. So we estimate the kind of traffic, we figure out what is the multiplier from the current average traffic that we have, and then we scale our infrastructure based on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the scale, there are 2 things you can do on the hardware and on the software, right? So hardware is fundamentally throwing more resources, and Puneet talked about this. I mean, you have to do scaling of the hardware. It has to be proportionate. Not all the pages and not all the services on your site actually will get the same amount of traffic. For instance, when Make My Trip runs a sale event, we do our estimates for flights versus hotels versus holidays, because we run our own data center. So we have a fixed number of hardware capacity. I mean, the capacity is constrained. So we have to deploy more towards the areas where we expect more sales to happen. So it's a proportionate scaling that you do on the hardware side. On the software side, there are a lot of things you can do. Number one, you have to be ready architecturally for that scale. But during the sales, what also we do is we try to serve as much out of cash as possible. So we do cash priming very aggressively during the sales event, fundamentally getting the price and availability of flights and hotels from our suppliers. So that is one thing that we do, and then there are things that we do on the database side. We can get into the details later in the session, but kind of tuning that we do on the database, thread pools, and also some aspects of bot detection and how we handle the bot traffic, good versus bad bots. We can get into all of those discussions later in the session.
Yeah, so exactly similar things. Just a couple of highlights about how things happen at Snapdeal. So Diwali season is very prime for our business. I mean, Snapdeal does close to 20-30% of its yearly business on the Diwali season. So Diwali is a big deal for us. And planning of Diwali starts way ahead in time. We go in a war zone, way early on. And from the technology perspective, it is very important for us to look at our entire stack and entire dependency of services over each other, as one whole thing for the stability of the platform. And we've found some very, very interesting nuggets over the years that we have added into our platform. For example, typically what kills us is not the traffic, but the spike. Our doors open at 12 in the night, and all of a sudden you have 7 lakh customers just logging in and trying to see what deals we have. We can sustain more than that, 10x of that customer over the day, but it's just that split second that you have to be careful about. Other things that typically slips your mind are your partners, your third-party dependencies. You can scale all you want, but you will realize that you forgot to work with them, and they have gone down, and which has created a ripple effect onto your uptime. And the third important thing is that you have to build some sort of circuit breakers in your system. It is better to serve a certain percentage of your traffic well, and maybe not serve the other percentage of traffic at all, rather than just go down completely. So what we have done is we've built circuit breakers into our entire platform. In case a certain service is misbehaving, we can take it offline. We can say it's okay for us to not show that particular feature for a little bit, but business should continue. Show must go on. So those are the few things that we do for our scaling.
Sanjay, you and Puneet both spoke about, we predict, we do a lot of figuring out what is going to be the spike. So can you talk a little bit more about, in your view, what kind of predictive algorithms and software and tools that you use to figure out, get a sense of what is going to hit us?
So some part of that, actually, honestly speaking, this is black magic, trying to predict what the traffic will be. So you have some past data on which you can do the best prediction. So the historical trends that you've seen in the past, that is a good guidance. When we ran our first AppFest last year, we didn't have any historical data, for instance, so we went aggressive on the estimation of traffic, and we over-provisioned actually. But once you do one AppFest, then the subsequent ones become easier. So that is that. Of course, some guidance from the marketing teams who are getting people into the funnel. What kind of ads are we running? How many people are seeing? And what kind of conversion is that supposed to lead to? All of those guide into that traffic prediction.
The first question though.
Okay, so I'll just add add on to Sanjay. So basically, when we ran our first sale last year, that was the Friendship Day sale in August, right? We had absolutely no clue what would hit us, and to be honest, we were slightly underprepared. We didn't estimate what sort of traffic we would get. So what we figured is, while the sale was on, at that time we were very, very closely monitoring our systems, our servers. We had some application monitoring also in place, and we had engineers on standby. It was actually a pretty thrilling time. So just figuring out that this service is spiking, now let's at runtime optimize it, right? So we were fairly young at that time as well. So that was the approach. But since then, and again, like Sanjay pointed, so we take help from the marketing team. We do some market research and analysis in terms of what rough traffic should we see, and we over provision a little so that we don't end up being on the wrong side.
Sorry, Pushpendra. So I'm from Amazon Web Services. So a lot of the startups today in India and worldwide run on our platform. And for these events, we have something called IEM, Infrastructure Event Management. Typically, the planning for the infrastructure scaling, if we know the event is going to happen, starts maybe a couple of weeks before that. Our engineers come and work with the customer. And look at the architecture, and we make sure that, every stage of the architecture, every piece of it, whether it's the network bandwidth coming into the data center, the load balancer, the web layer, app layer, database layer, there's no component which will become the bottleneck in this architecture. The other good thing about cloud is that we are actually able to have the option for testing at scale also. So, one can think about having infrastructure which is a replica of what my production environment is, and really testing it before the event happens. Example I like to give is one is, say, Hotstar, when they're hosting the cricket part of it. A lot of the infrastructure is on AWS, and at that point of time, it's not the cost of infra which is at risk. It's the reputation of the organizations, Also, a lot of money for the ads part of which we expect to make from, the more people who can log that event, the more money they can make out of it. The other interesting part is like, example is say NDTV to 2014 Lok Sabha elections. Nobody had a clue as to how high the spike will go. NDTV.com knew that, yes, people will log on to their website to see the results of Lok Sabha elections, which they can't see on TV. Like at TV, you can only show X amount, right? But on the website, you can see a lot more. Their traffic went up 26 times. Right? And the beauty of the part from the CIO's perspective was that by 2 o'clock, the traffic went down. People knew BJP was going to win. So they did not have to over-provision the hardware. He said, I paid you guys only from, say, 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. I didn't have to do more than that. I didn't have to. There was no sort of, from his perspective, he paid for exactly the right amount of what he used. Nothing more, nothing less. And he didn't lose any customers, and he was able to scale. So, yeah, lots of things over there.
You wanted to add something, Pushpendra?
Yeah, so market is basically the queue for us. So since we basically serve to a very targeted market, we know that how many trains are really going. And in holiday season, there are some special trains which are started. We know how many bookings are being done. We partner with railways. So in that sense, we basically provision at different levels. One is, of course, taking the input from the market. Then obviously using all the techniques like caching, and especially with regards to integrating with third party and railways, because they actually keep going down. And of course, like we are a startup, so for us, a cloud platform which can scale well to the demand really is a very basic requirement. And that's what I was telling Puneet before we started, that I won't really name the services, but there are certain services which don't allow that kind of scaling so fast. So we actually have stopped using that. And as a principle, we use the services which offer that kind of support to us. We keep redundancy. We keep redundancy at a very low level. So that really helps us for both failover as well as basically distribution, as well as scaling up very quickly. And scaling up can be done in a matter of hours. So for us, typically for holidays, we really pick up at mostly all the weekends during holidays. So it's a weekend
Especially
to a weekend thing.
Right?
I think Make My Trip and Oyo would understand that well, that that's how it actually happens.
Yeah. So I'm interested to know what kind of planning goes, to ensure that there are no security threats. And we hear a lot about attacks, the DDoS attacks, especially for the, the sites, so that it looks like an outage. So how do you handle that? Who wants to take this?
I can talk a little bit about it. So, since we are a fairly young and a nimble organization, we didn't want to invest a lot into figuring out how to prevent those attacks. So we ended up using, third-party tools and services like web application firewalls and stuff. So what they do is they excel in just this kind of, traffic monitoring and traffic filtering. So that has worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah, so at the WAF layer, the web application framework firewall, they catch a lot of the issues. So most of the DDoS filtering happens over there. Actually, the bots are also getting smarter nowadays. So they sneak through the WAF layer very conveniently. They vary their pace of attack. So for that, we have built our own framework. We are going to actually open source that in the first quarter. All of you are, I'll be happy if you take a look at that. We are calling it DataShark. Fundamentally, it's a framework which is more conditioned to your traffic. So we factor in the patterns that you are seeing at your site, and there are policies and rules that you can write on your side, but the entire parsing and detection, flagging, stopping all of the traffic would happen by this layer. So that is what we are doing. It's a machine-learned pattern detection kind of a system that we built. So that is more context-aware, and that is what is actually catching all these bots that are sneaking through. The other part is about the good bots. There are also good bots that come to your site, especially for a travel site like us. I mean, people want to scrape the rates, and we have affiliates who come to our site and they sell our inventory on their sites as well. So for those bots, we don't want to stop them. So we So what we do during the sales events and all is that these are good bots, but they can potentially bring your system down. So we have a separate pool. Once we do the filtering of the good bots, we put them on a separate pool. And then we throttle that pool actually. So even if that pool goes down, at least my B2C traffic will not be affected. So direct consumers who are coming to make my trip, they will be untouched.
Since we are on the topic of bots, just curious, are you using chat bots? I just recently read about Nordstorm launching this chat bot, just this holiday season because they believe that that's going to be a big help when it comes to engaging with the consumers and also reducing their, customer service cost. So is that something that's in use by any?
Yeah, so we are basically integrating that as a part of our app. However, we realized that chatbot is going to be an obsolete technology in another 6 months. More advanced would be that people just speak with the phone. The one that we actually see that in Siri and now Google also has it. So it's going to be very obsolete in another like 6 months, 1 year down the line, people are going to actually get used to using voice with app. And we are also, so we're basically getting a third party service and integrating. Voice has seen a lot of development in the last 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years. A lot of good startups are coming up. That like we are really speaking with a startup which is actually working with Indian languages. So you can actually speak with Hindi and
Local
Tamil
language.
and Telugu and
That will be more useful in your, especially in your case.
absolutely.
Right.
So we are quite excited about that.
So anyone else who's using chatbots or feels that it's going to be an obsolete technology in 6 months?
I think there will be hardly anybody who would not be thinking about bots or chat bots or the AI technology that is being developed. I think what is interesting for us is to find an actual application of that on our platform which helps the consumers. And we've seen a couple of use cases where assisted shopping helps to consumers in making decisions. We've helped language-based assistance in the platform. I think we are still at a very early stages of how the technology should be better catered to the consumer. I think the technology exists, but the use case of the technology is still very naive. And we are figuring it out as we go along as well.
From Amazon's side, we have Alexa, which is voice recognition service. And the way we are working is that we are providing the building blocks to developers like yourself. And then what software developers are doing is that hooking that up to additional services. So it's not just a voice recognition part of it, but next step is, okay, fine. The use case is not just recognizing the voice. I mean, if I want to book a cab, I say I want a cab from A to B. So then it will have a link up with the cab company, and then the next few questions will not come from, the AWS part will come from the cab company. And that will complete the booking part of it. So not just AWS by itself, but AWS in conjunction with third parties who are then hooked onto it. And that, I think, is a whole lot of interesting possibilities coming up over there.
Yeah, so one more question that I wanted to ask is, we hear about these top technology trends and, of course, IoT and machine learning, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. But there are some architectural related also, like I read about mesh app architecture and microservices. You spoke about it, Gaurav. And there's this adaptive security architecture. Anything that is already being planned or already in use that you would like to talk about?
I mean, I can talk about microservices architecture because we are very heavy users of microservices. And this started about a couple of years ago when we realized that the pace of innovation that we wanted could not be achieved by a monolithic piece of code or even a slight SOA architecture. It has to be completely microservices based. And the idea of a microservice, if you look at from a very high level, is that it allows you to do independent line of work without interrupting others or without blocking others while offering an SLA to everybody else. So you expose yourself as a service that can be accessed through an API, and then you expose an SLA. In our business, those SLAs could mean latency. In others, it could mean something else. We have more than 500 services now that constitutes Snapdeal.com, and they constantly talk to each other. The challenge becomes that how do you manage these microservices? Each microservice is an n-tier stack of its own. So how data is shared between them, how state is shared between them, and how to just purely manage it from the infrastructure side of things is very, very challenging. So for the last 6 to 8 months, we have been working on a new project which is based on self-healing and self-scaling technologies, and it is purely a homegrown idea that we are exploring, where the services are aware of what they need to be and can detect events such as that I am experiencing a high amount of load and I need to scale up, rather than an external trigger that comes and scales itself up, which also will help us next Diwali. Because one thing that I wanted to point out is this whole concept of Diwali or an event being an activity is very disruptive. In our business, 2-3 months of ops activity and engineering activity slows down because we are busy doing that. And we are hoping that the next Diwali will be just another day for us. It's a high ambition, but that's what we want to achieve.
That's
where the
amazing.
systems take care of things and scaling themselves and detecting what they are trying to do. It is easier to be done in stateless applications, so you can very easily scale your web tier, but it is very difficult to do it for the stateful applications like databases. And that's where we are putting a lot of our energy and focus to do that transparently as well. So microservices is one trend I feel will continue to catch up. It is very prevalent in web companies, but I won't be surprised if a lot of enterprise companies will start building applications in the similar fashion, because it has a lot of benefits.
I can tell you that most of our partners are now asking us to use microservices, and we are recommending the same to them as well.
So Nandini, I'll toss one more buzzword into this mix. Okay, we talked about three. So one is a new one is called serverless computing. So the way we were saying in Amazon that the best server to manage is no server. So effectively, what happens that you just write the code and that code runs. The infrastructure underneath that code is sort of Amazon's responsibility. Gaurav, you talked about scaling at the database layer being difficult. So again, having a NoSQL database which scales up and scales down based on a demand. So trying to make sure that all the layers are the scalability part or the issues are taken away from the developer, and the developer is focusing on the key functionality, whether it's the code writing the code functional part of it or the database part of it. Yeah. So yeah, so serverless computing is maybe one more buzzword. Let's see if it gets as popular as the other ones. Yeah.
It's actually already very popular.
Anybody else wants to add to this? The technology trends which is being used.
I'll just give a different, so Gaurav talked about most of the transactional stack and microservices adding a lot of value to the transactional stack. There's also a big data stack where a lot of interesting architectural patterns are emerging. A few years ago, the Lambda architecture was there, where the stream and batch processing went into different parts. Now, that differentiation is slowly merging because there are technologies available which can do both pretty well. And they keep giving it new names. Lambda was there, and then now they call it Kappa architecture. But fundamentally, there are different paradigms. That area is evolving very fast. And then on the ML front, machine learning front, a lot of new open source libraries. Google has one that is getting really popular. Stanford libraries are there. They are getting more widespread adoption these days. So we are certainly using those at MakeMyTrip, but even within the industry in general, I think it's moving at a very rapid pace. So I would encourage people to look at some of those components as well.
So is the platform that you currently have, is it good enough to withstand the next few years, or you think the time has come to refactor it, or is that easy to predict, or is it just going to come and hit you one day?
In Snapdeal's case, we just refactored it. So I think we were running at a platform that served us very well for that much growth, but we had to relook at the problem. And last year we started on this journey, and we were very excited that within a year we were able to transform ourselves to be prepared for the next N years. But who knows? We can't see the future, but I think we are
you're
secure
good for the next 10 years?
10 years is way too long for technology. I don't think anybody would say.
2 years is probably.
Yeah, exactly.
10 years is too long.
Okay.
Yeah, so I really think that in technology companies, it ever happens. I don't think that people are from those kind of backgrounds, that it ever happens that you make something and then you say, okay, now it's good for 10 years. It never happens like that. So for us, basically, refactoring has been going on since now 1 year plus, 1.5 years. We have a development lag of 1 more years to go. And obviously, like 6 months later, if you ask me, I will have another 1 year. So that will continue to happen. It never happens that you make it and you say, okay, now it's good for 5 years. Used to happen in 60s and 70s, not anymore.
That's true. That is so true. Yeah. So one question specifically for you, since it's a relatively new, comparatively much younger company. So have you learned something? Has Oyo learned something from, let's say, a Snapdeal or an Amazon or a MakeMyTrip, which are known for scale and volume? Is there something, some takeaway that you have got from whatever has happened with them?
So I think a lot, right? So what in our journey at Oyo, I think we've learned both from our experience as a young kid on the block and also from the trends which are out there in the market, right? So I mean, our journey has been as basic as while the sale is running, like I said, figure out why your database is not scaling up, what sort of things you need to cache, to the point of using good architectural practices. And to talk about the thing that we were just discussing a moment ago, so in terms of architectural refactoring, I think what we have learned is, best design is something that always evolves, and you don't have to, sort of stop the press and say, now we are refactoring, because the business would never allow that, right? So that's one thing that we have learned, that, build and scale your services in a way which can evolve with minimal disruption to business.
Great. Now that we have just 2 minutes, I think we can open it up for audience. Yeah, that's what. We can open it up for questions to the audience. There are people at the back who want to ask questions.
Hi, my question is specifically to Sanjay, that we are seeing that most of the planning is done based on some estimation about the load that we are expecting. But in travel industry, we see that airlines comes up one day and they say there is a sale. So how to MakeMyTrip handle, because this is not MakeMyTrip sale.
No, I was expecting that question. So those are flash sales that happen with our partner sites. And if an airline or a hotel chain is running a sale, we see a certain spike. So most of the times these guys are nice to us and they give us a heads up that we are going to run a sale. So at least we have some preparation. There are instances where we have to detect that a sale is happening because they open up, they reduce the prices, and then they want to experiment and see how the traffic shapes up. And in those cases, obviously something that saves us all the time is the hardware provisioning, that we have spare capacity available all the time. So our monitoring and alerting system is pretty good. We monitor it, and the moment we see the spike happening, an alert goes out to the DevOps and the infra team, and then we scale up proportionately.
Yeah, this is a question for Sanjay again. You referred to chatbots, okay, or you referred to the bots. So where are you in your journey on the bot side? Are you still looking at addressing that from a standpoint of frequently asked questions, or have you graduated to using artificial intelligence and NLP capabilities as well? And it would be nice if we could get a perspective from others also, because that's the buzzword across industries in terms of trying to move from voice to non-voice, voice to digital channels, and so on.
Yeah, so I think people have touched upon this issue already. Almost everyone is experimenting with the chatbot technology, and we are also doing it for the in-trip service, in-trip assistance. While you are traveling, what kind of assistance you can get through the chatbot. We've just launched that use case. The trouble is identifying the use cases. It came up here as well. It's not about the technology per se and how long it will last and whether that's the best technology for the future or not. I mean, the jury is still out. We'll see how the adoption goes. But we are all experimenting with it for some of the real use cases, solving a real problem.
So we actually run a support center also where people call. So basically that's a very good indicator for us is in terms of what are the kind of things people are looking for, what's the kind of support that people are looking for. So we actually use the recordings to really learn from that and really implement that. That's exactly what we're doing. And hopefully once it reaches the customer's hand, then we'll get to learn more. And these technologies, one needs to really keep developing and learning and adapting. So that's not the end of the world.
Am I audible? Yeah, so I was a quick question. I've been associated with the e-commerce, few organizations who have given birth to the e-commerce in India, right? So e-commerce is not an e-commerce anyhow. It is becoming a smart commerce. So what are your strategies or basically a roadmap ahead for 1 year to become a industry who has smart commerce rather than the e-commerce?
I didn't understand the question very well, but I heard smart commerce, so I'm just going to try to interpret from it.
Yeah, smart commerce meaning from an end user's perspective, right? And how the technology is basically converging, or how you basically from a Snapdeal or Make My Trip is converting the technology to or strategies and creating a roadmap ahead for making a smart commerce.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think it is, existential question for us to understand our consumers and build technology to come closer to them. And it starts from the point of predicting or understanding what do you need. For example, we learned that one of the things that customers really like to do or like to have is instant deliveries, and not instant deliveries of just groceries and things like that, but also items. You may have to go for a birthday party in 4 hours from now, and you wanted a gift and you don't want to go to a shop to buy it. So now we've added an instant delivery service in our platform, so you can choose from a variety of products which can give you a 4-hour delivery. Similarly, and that is a feature to our consumers, but it has a lot of implication on our entire stack. I mean, all the way from supply chain, where we stock, what kind of item, how to predict, in what geographic areas, what kind of consumers' demands are. So predicting all of that is a big challenge, and we are trying to become better and better at that. And you can apply the same sort of techniques to different paradigms, and on a daily basis we are learning our consumer behavior and becoming smarter.
All right, thanks.
Let me add a little bit to that one for the smart commerce. See, the holy grail of e-commerce is how well you understand your customers, right? So almost all the e-commerce companies, I mean, they're trying to get better and better at customer segmentation, customer understanding, and then personalized kind of discounting, coupons, services to those customers. I think most of the e-commerce companies are on the same journey, trying to get better and better at segmentation. The best segmentation, of course, is a segment of one, where you can really target one customer. You know exactly who this person is, and therefore you can give him or her exactly what he or she needs. Currently, the segment sizes are large. I mean, it's just a matter of time when everyone gets much and much better.
Hi. Please go ahead. Okay, so I heard because AWS guys are also here, they say that they are trying to host cloud, they can scale up, that's good. But on the other hand, Make My Trip says that they have own data center, they need to plan how much traffic would come. So are the big guys or big traffic guys are feeling challenged in terms of moving to cloud, which can give a very good scalability as well? In real time maybe.
So I'll take it first, I'll give it to Sanjay. So I don't think it's a question of, lack of scalability on the cloud, which is a bottleneck. I think it's each enterprise goes on its own transformation journey and decides whether cloud makes sense or not for them. So a lot of early startups who didn't have any legacy, didn't have a data center, said that, instead of trying to build my own data center, it makes sense for me to go to cloud on day one. Right? Companies who have made substantial investments in their own data centers, they say, I've already spent so much money, do I, I can't let this thing go away. So maybe for my new workloads, I'll move to cloud. Existing ones, I'll continue to run on data center, and maybe I'll then take a call to whether I want to migrate my workloads from my on-premise to cloud or not. So each customer has its own journey, is at a different stage at which they want to migrate or not want to migrate. So it's not that everything will migrate to cloud. What we are seeing though is a lot of customers are doing that path, and both from startups and enterprises.
So I'll add different, one more perspective to it, I mean, in addition to what Dhruv said. There are other factors that you have to consider when moving to the cloud, right? I mean, there are PIIs that cannot leave the national boundary, for instance. So there are personally identifiable information that you have to keep within the national boundary. I mean, AWS was not available in India till a few months ago, right? So that also, I mean, that could have been one consideration. Older companies, I mean, we have been around for a long time. Obviously, we started with our own data center. There are some of the newer components that we are building on the cloud. I will not name the vendor, but yes, we are experimenting because that gives you much more elasticity in scaling. Your own data centers, obviously, I mean, you can have cost optimization and performance optimization. But for horizontal scaling and spike handling, I think the cloud is a much better choice.
So,
I just want to add one quick thing. I think the notion of cloud just being as a public cloud is also not correct. AWS, Azure, and all they are public clouds, but you are building data centers now as private clouds. They are also clouds. The difference being, yes, you manage the infrastructure, the hardware along with it, but the flexibility, the elasticity and all, and the way you communicate with your infrastructure is the same. And the way AWS was very successful is because it gave you access to infrastructure by just an API call. And the new infrastructure that people are making, like Snapdeal, at which we have built a hybrid cloud. We have our own data centers running our own cloud software, and it feels, it looks and feels just like AWS. And it extends seamlessly into AWS also. So you're not bound by the capacity of your cloud, because you can very easily burst into the public cloud or leave some applications in a public cloud and run the others in private. So the notion of cloud is going to become ubiquitous to how people will manage data centers going forward.
So I have a question on to the e-commerce service companies, not the platform companies. Many times when you put up variable pricing, which is, so many units are at this price, so many units at some other price, etc. By the time you book your order, the price changes. It could be that, it is designed to change because you want to optimize your price, or it could be that you really have that inventory. Are there any regulations to maintain some audit trails or give customer comfort versus brick and mortar shopping where you go and you know the price and you will pick up at that price? So many times the price changes. So.
Right, so that is what we call bookability. I mean, especially in the travel segment, you get your supply pricing availability from a global distribution system as well, right? And even they guarantee, I mean, see, the fundamental problem here is everyone is serving out of their caches, and the cache goes stale. So after some time, I mean, the kind of caching that you do, I mean, if you can keep your cache completely up to date with the current state of availability and the supply availability, that is the best option you have. But typically there are limitations both on the supplier side as well as on our side. You can't do 100% caching of all the traffic routes, for instance. So the price that we show on listing is just as good as what we have in the cache. And then at the time of booking, when we go directly to book with the supplier, there's a chance, 5% chance, or maybe less than that, and we are trying to get better and better at it. But there's a small chance that the price will change, because you were serving from a cache and now you are going to the supplier and getting the real-time price.
My question is different. That is, you mentioned that...
Can we take the last question, please?
Regulatory, I think you're talking about any regulatory guidelines.
Yeah, regulatory around it. That means you are not doing it by design, but you're really having that much inventory, and is it made visible to the buyer?
Yeah, in short, I can tell you that I don't know of whether it's a regulatory thing or not, but at least on our platform, we don't do that. The price is not different for different customers. What sometimes changes is the delivery cost, depending on which region you're coming from, and that may come up as a different pricing to different customers, but that's at least from a high level comment.
So there is perishable inventory which will have variable pricing, and the kind of products that you're trying to sell, the pricing on the perishable inventory will be variable. It will fluctuate more often than the fixed inventory pricing.
Hi,
We have time for just one more question.
hi, I
Last
am
question.
Gyanendra. Hi, I am Gyanendra from Global Logic. So I have a question for Dhruv especially. So Dhruv, you already talked about the serverless computing, right? So I have a question on AWS Lambda. Like AWS Lambda supports serverless architecture. So how it's going to help in e-commerce business? What would be the impact of that?
So a couple of points. One is, of course, the fact that we've talked of scaling a lot, right? So scaling means that you say, okay, fine. I'm anticipating that I'll need, I need 10 servers to be able to handle the workload spike or the spike which is going to come. And then you provision those 10 servers and you run your code on those 10 servers in anticipation of the spike or the workload which you expect to come. In the case of Lambda, what happens is that you only write the code. As the traffic for that, say you write a function, and as more and more requests come for that function, which could be a pricing function or recommendation function or whatever code which you've written in Lambda, the underlying infrastructure to support that function call is in some ways Amazon's responsibility. We will scale that up automatically. So from a development perspective, it becomes a lot simpler. You are only writing the function which has got the, obviously, or hopefully the best function logic we can think of. The scalability of both auto scaling up and down of the infrastructure required to run that function is done by Amazon. And that's what's called serverless computing, that you as a user are not worried about a server. Amazon handles that part of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Do we have time for one more question? No. I'm sorry.
You had a comment.
I just wanted to
One more
ask
question?
something specific to
You have one
e-commerce.
question?
Gaurav, you had a comment? Why didn't you finish?
Yeah, because the question was specific to e-commerce. I just wanted to add a simple use case that we are thinking. So when a customer comes to our site, we do some signature matching. What device is he coming from? He or she is coming from. Whether it's we are trying to detect whether it's a valid user or not. And that's a very, very fixed sort of form of computing that we do on every request or at every time a user comes in. And a Lambda function is like a best use case for that, because it's a very, very defined computation that we have to do at a very fast speed for all the customers. And then we use Lambda functions for such computations very often.
Yes, so the question that I had is, all of you have been luminaries in this space that you're working in, and you started with maybe a data center or the cloud, and you've been introducing words like microservices and serverless architecture to scale up. What would be your advice to the startups now? How do they start building a framework which is scalable to handle a peak or something?
Sure. So I'll give my perspective to it. I think my advice to startups who are starting now would be start simple, right? So don't overthink and don't over-design your systems and architecture. It's very hard to predict, what your product is going to be in the market like, and how are users going to accept it, and what parts of your product would need scaling up more than the others. So start simple, but have really good eyes and ears into the game, right? Use good tools and softwares where you know what is happening in the product at runtime, at all times. Good alerting and monitoring, as Sanjay also pointed out, right? And based on that, capture data and act on those things, right? There are some things, there are some knowledge banks that you can bank on and design good systems. But a lot of it in a startup is going to be, observe and then react to it and build better systems.
And just to add to what Puneet is saying, so basically there are two stages of a startup. One is before the product market fit has been established, and after the product market fit has been established. So of course, before the product market fit has been established, what he's saying is that you start simple, you figure out the market, you see whether people are going to pay for the services and goods that you are going to sell. But as soon as this is over, don't delay the thinking on architecture and technology. And in our case, we actually delayed it and we suffered quite a lot. I would really advise to do that ASAP as soon as the product market fit has been established.
Okay.
Hi, one last question.
No, I think we need to wrap up.
I don't think we have time.
Can we just wrap up?
And
So-
of course, like, don't
Yeah,
think...
they're going to be around during
Yeah.
lunch break and tea breaks. Please
Yeah,
feel free to, chat
And
with
for
them.
startup, don't ever think like a data center, enterprise data center. Just go to one of these guys and they'll help you.
Thank you very much.
So I just want to, I want to thank NASSCOM first of all for giving me this opportunity. It's been an amazing experience chatting with all these technology experts. And thank you panelists for, some amazing insights. And thank you audience for some probing questions. It's been a pleasure. Thanks,
Thank you very
Sumeet.
much.
Over to you.
We have the gifts.